From singer to conservative commentator, watch Amanda Head's controversial opinions of the Hollywood sex scandals in part 2 of my conversation with the Hollywood conservative. I do want to, because you are in Hollywood and have seen all this stuff going on, and I've never seen anything that the left kind of helped stir up that has ever been beneficial, but I have enjoyed the fact that so many people are, going after the sexual assault stuff going on, being like, believe everyone, that I think has helped people come forward, at least in some areas, even though in a witch hunt, a lot of people are also thrown in the fire that aren't witches. But I'm so glad to see these people that are terrible getting finally uncovered for who they really are. There's a few people that have had some recent backlash that I would love to get your opinion on, because I think these are both very fascinating quotes. One being Jennifer Gardner, who I think is fantastic. I love Jennifer Gardner. She said, we can't lump all men into the same category. We can't just assume that every man has done something awful or that every man is guilty. Due process is important and has to take place, but she's excited for what might happen. She got a lot of flack for that. As well, Pamela Anderson said, we naturally blame ourselves. You somehow think that you are to blame, but I learned to never put myself into those situations again. When I came into Hollywood, I, of course, had a lot of offers to do private auditions and things that made absolutely no sense. Common sense, don't go into a hotel room alone. If someone answers the door in a bathrobe, leave. And she got a lot of flack for that too. So I'm very curious to get your opinion on both these situations.
Sure. Okay, so I had to jot down a few notes so that I can make sure I hit all of the points. So as far as Jennifer Gardner's comments about all men not being the same, of course they're not. I have excellent examples of godly men in my life. My father, who has been married to my mother for over 40 years, only ever been married to her. Both sets of my grandparents were married over 50 years before one of them passed away. My boyfriend, incredibly godly man. His father, incredibly godly man. And speaking specifically about my own father and tying this into Mike Pence and the criticism that he received when he said he doesn't go to, dinner one-on-one with another woman other than his wife.
Yeah.
They called him, prude and all of this kind of stuff. Apart from the religious aspect and, the devotion to his wife that led to that decision, my dad does the same thing. And it's for a multitude of reasons, but it's also because it's like business-wise, it's very smart. Because if you don't put yourself in that situation, then you can't be accused of those things. And that also goes into Pamela Anderson's comments with not putting yourself in the situation. I've done so many videos the last few weeks about how, I have never been, knock on wood, I've never been sexually assaulted physically. I mean, living in Hollywood, you get dirty comments. People will say things to you. When I was in the studio with men, they would make crass comments. But it was nothing that I got upset over or especially to the extent that I would file a police report or go public or whatever. Sometimes, obviously, it has more to do with them as a person than it does you. So that's one reason that you just kind of brush it off. And I'm not saying that it should always be brushed off. And I'm not saying that all of these victims, that all of these situations were avoidable. But I 100% agree with Pam Anderson in that the reason that I have never been a victim of something like what's coming out is because I didn't go to a studio when there was one producer there who was a guy. I didn't go to a studio where there was one engineer who was a guy or two. I never entered into those situations, and you have to be cognizant of what's happening, and you have to be prepared for the business opportunities that are upcoming, and know that, if I'm going to have this meeting with someone, then maybe I should bring along my neighbor. Maybe I should bring along my friend. It's like she said, it's common sense. These are things that you can do. And it's not awesome that we have to take these steps to protect ourselves. It sucks that there are guys like that out there, but this is when it comes down to the issue of personal responsibility. You do your due diligence to make sure that you are in a safe environment, and beyond that, that's the control that you have. But so many women in Hollywood, I don't want to say so many, a lot of women in Hollywood who are coming out making these allegations. It's like, are you saying it now because you feel safe? Or are you saying it now because your career hasn't panned out the way that you expected, and you thought that by playing into this producer or this director or this writer's hands, that you would be further than you were. Because a lot of the women who stood up for themselves and stood up for morality within Hollywood, you don't know their names because they're not here anymore, because they left Hollywood, because they didn't get that job, or, they didn't book that role. And, all of these celebrity women who are coming out telling their stories, I don't find them courageous at all. It's opportunism because they are comfortable and successful. And I don't find them heroic at all. Sorry.
Yeah, it was I had so many debates with some close friends in Hollywood about this, because my instinct is to always go to individual responsibility. Like, if a guy does that and I find out about it, I want to just deck him in the face, right? And then all my girlfriends, I'm like, if the guy opens the door with a bathrobe on, like, don't go in. Like, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's still, I want personal responsibility to happen, but I also want these guys to get crushed. And that was the thing that bothered me the most when I talked about this and people got heated at me for discussing, were the Hollywood A-listers that did benefit from this process. And when, obviously we're believing Christians, so I know morally, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to compromise in that way. But if sex out here is strictly just mutually beneficial thing that can happen, it's like, well, then if a girl sleeps with the producer and gets a job, more power to her or whatever. And then for the A-list actresses who, I guarantee you, if they had reached out to ABC, any news outlet, any magazine, said, hey, I want to come forward with this exclusive, and they have the platform, they're not going to get blacklisted, they're too big. All those people didn't come out until the people underneath them did it first. And then it was all of a sudden convenient. Like, you were thanking them at the Oscars. And I'm like, you could have set up, you would have the exclusive, millions of dollars, any network. Like, so-and-so woman comes forward. How many bad
actresses do we know who should not have the level of fame that they do? But they did a movie with Harvey Weinstein.
It's just really,
just saying.
Yeah, it's sad and it's frustrating, because I feel like you don't want to blame anyone, but I just know that it could have ended a lot sooner and been done in a different way, and that's what was kind of frustrating and tough for me.
I mean, honestly, if it was me, okay, so let's say hypothetically I was an actress and I gave up a little something to Harvey Weinstein. I got a role. It blew up my career. And now when people are saying things, I'm like, okay, well, I remember when this happened. I remember that I did that thing. Do I come out and say anything? I would not, because you're basically admitting that you are part of the problem.
Oh, yeah.
I'd keep my mouth shut.
It really is just I call it just a glass castle out here, where just people were just living in that environment and benefiting each other. It was like the producers, Hollywood, the media, the news, they were all kind of like in bed together, and that's finally cracking a little bit, where you can see through all these huge DNC donors have been doing all this terrible stuff, but they're promoting women's rights, women's equality, and all that stuff.
Right. And that's the funny thing, is like a lot of these men who are being accused of these things are guys who are like champions for women, and I'm a male feminist, and blah 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 blah. It's like, wow, now we know where you really stand.
Yeah. Do you think this is going to continue, or you think this is finally going to start closing down some doors and getting the right people in trouble?
I think it will continue. I think that with our news cycle being so fast and our short attention span, I think it will stop making news. But I hope that women will continue, to speak out when this happens to them. I don't know if the speaking out about an instance that happened 20 years ago is really fruitful to the effort. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, I feel like two things will happen. I think that men will watch themselves more, and the crappy men who are out there doing this, maybe will stop. And also, women now, when it happens, can say something. And a lot of, I'm not saying that every single one of the women who have stepped forward is credible. I don't agree with the sentiment that every woman should be believed. I think that every woman should be listened to, and upon that, due process should take place thereafter. But I don't think that we've gotten into this very dangerous place of believing immediately. And, I hate to say it, but I know that some of these women are lying. I know that some of them are being disingenuous. Hopefully not many of them, but it is happening. So I think that it will continue to happen. I think that women will continue speaking out, but I don't think that it will be getting the press coverage that it has been the last few months.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of sad too, because I know it does happen on both sides of the spectrum. Like a lot of guys go through this stuff. Like Terry Crews almost got no traction, even though he's a huge guy with his whole situation. Yeah. And as soon as Weinstein happened, just because I've been in a lot of different sets in the Eastern kind of hemisphere where House of Cards was going on, I knew about Spacey for a long time. A lot of like firsthand accounts of guys. He's like, dude, you can't be straight on that set. You have to like constantly know where you are and like know where he is. And I never thought he would get caught, but it's just, I hope that it just opens up all sides of it, because there's a lot of that going on both sides in Hollywood.
Yeah, and now it's moving into journalism, Matt Lauer and
yes, it's absolutely nuts. Well, I could stay talking to you about this forever because it is such a fascinating topic, but I do want to make a hard left and do a completely different topic here, because I know it's something we're both extremely passionate about, from you going to Auburn, me being in the Southeast, and that's football. And one of your recent articles that you posted on the Hollywood Conservative, that was also on Fox News, it's really about the $100 million shakedown that the players union has put together for social justice. So give me your take on it.
Forgive me if I repeat some of my talking points from Fox yesterday, but this basically was a bartering mechanism for the NFL. I think it was almost the NFL giving the players an out, because the players know that if they stop kneeling, that, and there's not really any impetus for that they'll just kind of look like idiots. So I think that this was a bartering tool, but also the NFL kind of throwing a bone to the players, saying, okay, we'll give, $89 million if you guys will stand. And it clearly didn't work, because 25 of them were still kneeling on Sunday. So they basically were like, oh yeah, we'll take your money, and then we're going to use it as an e-pad when we kneel. But so I think 50 million of it is going to go to the Players Coalition, which is dispersed among various other, of course, liberal-leaning charities. Mm-hmm. Then the other half is going to be split up among Dream Corps, which is a pet project of Van Jones from CNN. Very, very convenient timing for him, since he has a book out right now. Oh. And then the other 25% goes to UNCF, which is United Negro College Fund. But, as I talked about on air yesterday, and Larry Elder talks about this a lot, Dennis Prager talks about this a lot, a lot of Black conservatives talk about this a lot, about how, the problems that the liberal ideology focuses on within the Black community. Right now the trending thing to talk about is Black Lives Matter. And it was based off of the false premise of hands up, don't shoot, which was unequivocally and evidentially disproven in court. And yet I still see t-shirts that say hands up, don't shoot. I'm like, you're such an idiot. But anyway,
it's amazing how strong that narrative was. I mean, I can't get anyone to see it the other way out here.
You have the president of the United States talking about it in Rose Garden. It's hard to erase it.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, so you've got that issue that the NFL has latched onto, these players, this notion of alleged police brutality. But it's ironic, because you have this professional demographic of NFL, of sports professional athletes, who commit violent crimes, rape, assault, robbery, at a higher rate than other professional demographics. And I'm not specifically talking about one race or another. I'm saying within that demographic, they get off easy a lot. So it's very rich to me that they're the ones who are talking about this. But at any rate, so that is how this all started within the NFL. But that's not the problem in the Black community. The problem in the Black community is 3 out of 4 kids growing up without a daddy or a mommy, high school dropout rates that are, up in the freaking ether compared to other demographics, mm-hmm. Black on Black crime. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. Keith Ellison doesn't want to talk about it. Rahm Emanuel doesn't want to talk about that. Jerry Brown doesn't want to talk about that. Those are the problems that need to be fixed. And I think that if we can do that, then we can actually kind of shift that entire demographic, that entire racial demographic, out of the plantation mentality that they have, because you've got baby mamas in Chicago who are having children and are married to the government because they are continually getting funds from the government for every child that they have. And you've got, and this is something I said on Fox News the other day, Tupac did an interview in the 90s where he said, if I had grown up with a father I would be a much different and better man. And people in the NFL, celebrities love to hold each other up as heroes. And it's like, all right, here's somebody from your own community. Here's Tupac Shakur admitting that that was like probably one of the biggest indicators in his life that directed his career the way that he did. The things that he rapped about, the subject matter that he talked about in interviews, that was like a deciding factor for him in his life, was have the presence or lack of presence of a father.
Yeah, and I do hate, like you said, for this whole movement to be based on a lie that is even a statistical lie, because according to John Jay College, you're more statistically likely to get shot if you're white than a black man in a similar situation. Which
2013 to 2015. This is an FBI crime stat. This is not something from the NRA or Breitbart. 49% of individuals killed by cops from summer of 2013 to summer of 2015. 49% were white. 30% were black. Now, the inverse to that statistic that drives it home even more is that blacks, statistically, not based on feelings, statistically, are more inclined to commit violent crimes. So any reasonable person would deduce that that means that cops are actually more hesitant to shoot black people than they are white people.
Right, 50% of the murder rate actually in that community, which is devastating. And I thought it was it killed me because it was so frustrating, because I'm like, this is the one thing that unifies people, sports in general. Like, from a guy that did college sports at Florida, Georgia, no one cared. As soon as you step on the field, if you're that quarterback, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, whatever, we were rallying behind you. We want you to succeed. It's just this unifying thing that removes politics, and yet they somehow managed to get in there and ruin it. I thought it was a fantastic study almost, though, as far as the way the capitalist system should work. Because if you do that, first of all, the bosses have the right, once you put on the uniform, this is what you're supposed to do. In your personal life, you can do certain stuff, but when you're wearing our uniform, these are the rules. They can impose whatever rules they want. It's not being a plantation owner for you to say that. If I'm working at Papa John's and I'm wearing your jersey and I decide to take a knee and not deliver pizzas, it's like, well, you can get fired, and it's not social justice. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, these are privately owned businesses. If you don't abide by the rules, you get fired.
Right. And then the viewers are the buyers, and if they're like, look, we don't want you, disrespecting our flag, that we can just choose not to tune in or follow a different team, and it would have balanced itself out. But it was just this crazy storm of just like racism and just, you're a horrible person if you disagree, or this is not about the flag. Even though if I was protesting like the minimum wage or something at the Martin Luther King Memorial and it was throwing sticks at it, and they're like, well, that's really racist for you to throw a stick at the statue. I'm like, no, this has nothing to do with Martin Luther. This has to do with minimum wage. I'm like, no, you can't do that. You can't just take a knee during the national anthem and say this has nothing to do with America.
Well, liberals ruin everything. Liberals, they ruined Christmas. They ruined Halloween because of cultural appropriation. They ruined sports. Liberals, literally, they are the wet blanket of everything. They ruin everything.
I know, it is absolutely unbelievable. I really hope we get our football back, and I hope that they just stop showing these guys on TV, because it just
But
it hurts.
Regarding Christmas and the reemergence of the phrase "Merry Christmas," I was walking up on Hollywood Boulevard up near Chinese theater and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And as I'm sure you know, there are guys out there with pamphlets for celebrity tours. And there were two guys that were working in conjunction with each other, and I was approaching them, and I heard one of them saying, tours, celebrity tours, we'll take you to all the stars' houses, blah, 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 blah. All right, thanks, Merry Christmas. And then he turns to his friend, and he goes, I can say that now, right? And the other guy goes, yeah, thank God, Merry Christmas. I was like, yay!
It's happening, Trump.
And it's not because I don't recognize Jewish holidays or, any other religion's holidays. It's not because I don't recognize that. It's because I celebrate Christmas, and I'm celebrating my Christmas cheer with you. If I say Merry Christmas to you, and in response, you as a Jewish person say, Happy Hanukkah, I'm not going to be offended. I'll be like, yes, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. I don't care. But over the last 8 years, we have been trained to look for reasons to be offended. Mm-hmm. And we need to go completely in the opposite direction. And thank goodness, because Trump seems to offend people every day. I think that we are finally shifting the pendulum in the other direction.
I totally agree. I think the conservative nature is just, hey, you do you, I'm going to do me. All right, we're all going to be good. It's great. Well, to wrap up, just because we do a lot of movie reviews on here, I'm curious, since you're in Hollywood, your opinion on what your favorite film so far of 2017 was.
I can't actually remember the last movie I saw in a theater.
No.
Blade Runner. I saw Blade Runner in the theater. It was pretty good, yeah. My boyfriend tried to make me watch the old one before we went to see that one. and I fell asleep like 20 minutes in.
Amanda.
I'm such a bad movie watcher. I'm the same way in the car. If I'm in the car longer than 10 minutes, I'm asleep. Like, no question about it. Same thing with movies, especially if I'm like laying down on a pillow, like to the degree that my boyfriend's like, Amanda, sit up. You have to sit up. Yeah.
No, I tell my wife the same thing when we're watching one of those movies. I'm like, if you lay down, you know you're going to fall asleep. You got to sit up for a second.
I'm the worst person to be married or to be dating an actor, because it's like, this is what he does. This is what you do. And yet I don't know what it is. It's not that I find it uninteresting or anything like that. Although the old Blade Runner, I was kind of like, this is just stupid. But even like the weird stuff I can get on board with. What's his name? David Lynch. Like, some of his stuff, like, it's super weird, but it's entertaining. But, you know, some of my favorite movies I fall asleep during. Some of the most exciting things. I fell asleep during the last Mission Impossible. So, and that was in the theater with, like, surround sound.
Oh, it hurts.
It's just a thing for me.
Well,
I would much rather read.
Yeah, well, if you and your boyfriend figure out what it is that makes you guys go to sleep, please let me know so I can figure that out, so I can tell my wife how to keep her awake. But I totally agree. Blade Runner 2049, I think, is the best movie of the year. I think it's fantastic. The original one is also great if you see the final cut without the voiceovers. Hope you guys do that. But anyway, yeah, okay. Amanda, thank you so much. It's been terrific talking to you, and I hope we get to do it again soon.
Absolutely.
All right, if you like this video and others like it, please consider becoming a premium member to The Rebel. That way you'll have first access to Pure Hollywood and the entire Rebel lineup.